recording of this. So just so you know, it is being recorded. So I thought, you know, I don't want to take, we only have an hour, so we probably won't go around and do introductions, but I was wondering if you don't mind dropping in the chat box what club you're from. And if your club is not obvious, what city that's in, if you don't care to also add kind of the city so that we can all kind of know where everyone's calling from. Just add that into the chat. And for those of you that I haven't met yet, I'm Jenny. I volunteer with District 6690 as the membership chair. So we've been doing these roundtables about every other month. It sounds like from some of the feedback we got in our recent survey that some folks are hoping to have them be a little bit more frequent. So we're working, me and my committee are working on adding some new topics and maybe doing, offering a couple more of these throughout. So, all right, I am going to go ahead and share my screen. I have a very basic PowerPoint tonight, which I will of course make available to all of you. Okay, let's see here. Present mode. Okay. Alrighty. So again, tonight's topic is tackling retention troubles. And for those of you that haven't been on one of these calls before, they're open to anyone, and it's really just idea sharing. I'll share some cool things I've learned along the way and my you know, research and things like that, but it's really a time for all of us. So feel free to add your own feedback, add your own ideas. That's definitely welcome. But all of the topics were chosen by a survey to club membership chairs. And that's how I determined what topics we would build these conversations around each month. So I'm really glad that all of you have chosen to spend your time with us this evening. So we're going to jump right in, and feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat box if you're more comfortable. But just kind of quickly, why do you think people leave your club? And if nobody ever leaves your club, think of another club that you know and imagine why people leave that club. So feel free to use the chat, or you're welcome to raise hand, unmute, and share why you think people leave your club. I feel like I'm seeing some typing here. So. Okay, David shares expectations don't line up with reality. Service, yep, right. They're not, so the member's not kind of getting what they had hoped for. Oh, change lunches, increase in price. Yep. Steve, you had one. Do you want to add yours? Or unmute and share yours? Someone else said cost.
Yeah, I mean, right. You know, basically, I have a large, in Columbus, we're a large club, and basically we don't work hard enough at engaging members early enough and and following them to make sure that they are engaged. If they engage themselves because they have that type of personality, that's great, and then they become great members. But I don't think we don't have a great system to make sure new members are engaged.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, and I think, you know, that kind of aligns with what I think it's Wolf said, that, you know, maybe nobody's going to notice if they didn't come or if they kind of stopped engaging, and not really having that plan to, you know, really connect with members. Jay from Marysville shares doing the same thing over and over again. So kind of no change, right? It's, you've done the same project every year. You've done, you know, kind of do the same meeting routine and you've never changed it. Yep. Not enough, people don't have enough time to be at every meeting, changing interests. Price shared that club experience no longer meets their expectations. Absolutely. Anyone else want to have something they want to share before we kind of dive into what our data says. All right. So when we look at member termination reasons in DACDB in our database, also I think it's hysterical that we say member terminations like we're terminating them. And every time, I don't know about you all, but anytime I look at this particular report, I use the Terminator voice when I'm thinking about it in my head. So if you hadn't been doing that up until now, you're welcome. You're going to start doing it from now forward. So you're welcome for that. But what you see here are the bullet points that the bullet points here are the reasons that you can select why a member is leaving. So as you can imagine, when I analyze our data, almost all of them are either business obligations or personal. That's the overwhelming majority of it. So, you know, when we think about, you know, someone kind of saying, oh yeah, business obligations, or, you know, personal reasons, I'm leaving for personal reasons, or I'm really, you know, kind of no longer interested, whatever it is. And the interesting thing is there aren't a lot, you know, I don't think a lot of clubs are actually asking the person why they have decided to leave. I think more often than not, that person kind of just, you know, kind of fades away. And then you're like, oh yeah, we haven't seen Johnny in a couple of months and he stopped paying his dues. Let's just go ahead and terminate. And oh yeah, let's pick personal, or let's pick business obligations. We know he changed a job or something like that, right? A lot of times we're not getting this kind of data from the actual person, the terminated member necessarily. So at a district level, we are actually starting a survey process where we're connecting with those terminated members, one, to get some more feedback from them, but then also to hopefully navigate them to a different club. Like if it's just a matter of logistics and maybe they move to another part of our district and just need help kind of connecting with that new club, we're going to help do that. But when I look at these termination reasons and what we collect, what Rotary collects about why people leave, in my mind, you know, I kind of think of that dating cliche of, you know, it's not me, it's you. And that's really what we're saying here, because every termination reason that we give someone to list why they're leaving, or we kind of guess why they're leaving, it puts the responsibility on the member who is terminating, not on the club, right? We're kind of saying like, oh, they had business obligations. They had a personal reason to leave. They had a financial reason to leave, right? We're not really, you know, really asking for feedback for ourselves as a club, which I think is interesting. And I think it tends to be a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy for us as club leaders, because it kind of allows us to get away with never really looking inward of what could we be doing to retain members, because we're always kind of looking to say, oh, they're leaving because of their business obligations. And a lot of you are already ahead of the game, because when I asked why people were leaving, you were reflecting in your own club experiences why that was happening, right? Oh, it's gotten too expensive, or it's just not, you know, maybe logistically isn't flexible enough anymore, things like that. So when I look at this, you know, I kind of think of traditionally, this is what we've gotten away with for a really long time in Rotary, right? We've offered a couple of options and people can kind of fit into those three options, and that's it. And if not, you know, we've not really had so much of a, yeah, David, yeah, it's not me, it's you. I like that, yeah. So we've not really had a ton of options, and that has really limited how much we can retain members, right? There's only so much you can do to entice someone to stay, right? If we don't kind of change what we're offering or change the way that we're offering it. So, you know, we're going to move up to kind of the level two shape sorter here, and say that 5 times real fast, and offer a lot more opportunities for more people to get involved with our clubs. So we look here, right? There's a lot more, you know, kind of variety of options here. And that's really what I want to focus on tonight is, you know, not so much looking at an individual member and kind of why they left, but what we can do as clubs and what we can do as Rotary to try to remove as many barriers and open up as many opportunities pun intended, for people to stay engaged with Rotary. So here's what, and this kind of captures what you all were saying, but these kind of, rather than saying member termination reasons, but really a club loss reason. Why did we lose that member as a club? And a lot of you hit on this. The cost of membership is too expensive. This might be the dues. This might be related to just, the meal. I think Mike mentioned that the meals where his club meets are getting a little pricey. Membership expectations are too high. So someone said, oh, they can't make those meetings anymore. So maybe if a club has a really strict attendance policy still, that might be something that people kind of shy away from and say, oh gosh, I really can't commit to this. I'm not going to be a good enough member to be a part of this club. Here's one that makes me feel a little uncomfortable, but the club didn't make the member feel welcome. And that could mean, to Steve's point, or I think to Wolf's point, that maybe they just weren't engaged enough in the beginning. But also it could mean that maybe that's a club that is lacking in diversity or maybe struggles with inclusion. And so, this new member walking in is kind of looking around saying, oh gosh, I don't really know if I fit in here. The meeting time and location is inconvenient, right? There's sometimes that, it is what it is. And logistically, it might not work for someone. It might be the location. I was having a conversation with some people from Westerville Rotary recently, and we were talking about, because I live in a small rural town. So for me to get across, or, the town that I work in, to make it to a lunch meeting, that takes me about 4 minutes. So in my mind, when people say, oh gosh, I can't take 2 hours off for lunch, I'm like, why do you have a 2-hour meeting? But because I don't live in an urban or a metropolitan area, it was going right over my head that people in Central Ohio, kind of in the Columbus area, to get across town for a lunch meeting, that's tacking on an extra hour in the middle of their day to get there. And so kind of taking all of those things into consideration when you look at kind of who you're pulling from. The club's, someone mentioned this, the club's service opportunities don't align with the members' expectations. So I give the example, and I think I gave this example a couple of weeks ago in a meeting, that, let's say that we have, this individual who cares about community service, wants to get involved with community service, stumbles upon Rotary and joins. And when they join, they say, I'm really interested in community service. And so the club said, great, we're the organization for you. Come on in. We're all about community service. And no one really sat down with that member and asked them, what type of community service? Why is community service so important? And so this happened to be a club that focused a lot on literacy. That was just kind of the history of the club. They'd always done a lot of childhood education literacy projects. And this member was happy to do it. They kind of, filed right along and participated. But had anyone sat down and really talked to this member, we might have learned that they're actually really, really interested in public health. And they've even started getting involved in other organizations to really work on that, because that's where their community service interest lies. So we kind of miss an opportunity when we don't engage and get to know those members, whether they're new or tenured members, when we don't really get to know kind of why service, what type of service, what expertise do they have or want to offer. So, really making sure that we're communicating and connecting with those members so we don't miss those opportunities. Because, imagine, that person who's really interested in public health or, Alzheimer's work or something. What an opportunity we have to engage them through Rotary and pull other people into that. So I think sometimes we just, miss those opportunities sometimes. Yep, so Joe brings up a great one, kind of circling back up to not feeling welcome. Those interpersonal conflicts or overbearing or abusive members, absolutely 100%. So, and this is a good thing to bring up because, Rotary's been working a lot on their diversity and, there's a new diversity and inclusion statement. And there's also been a great deal of training and new policy related to adult harassment in Rotary. So you can actually find a video. I assisted in training on the adult harassment policy last summer a couple of times. and kind of breaking down, how do you deal with this? You know, when there's a member's behavior that is inappropriate and toxic, and kind of going through it. Maybe we could even add that as one of the topics for a monthly roundtable on how do you respond in that moment when that person shares that, you know, that joke that kind of, you know, you're sitting there and on the inside you're cringing, but you're kind of smiling on the outside because you don't really know what to do. And we could walk through those and kind of know how to navigate those things. And my response to that is always, you know, because I've been through that experience myself in Rotary, being on the receiving end of that very inappropriate behavior. And, you know, I think so many times we focus on the offender's feelings or their contributions to our organization. We say, oh gosh, well, yeah, that guy's really a jerk, but you know, he does a lot. He contributes a lot. He donates a lot of money. He spends a lot of time in Rotary. So it's kind of saying that's more important than the way that that behavior is kind of making everyone else feel, or making some people feel. And my response to that always is, if we are worried so much about that person's behavior and how confronting them, what the effect of confronting them is going to be, I think we also need to understand the risks associated with our silence and what that means to the people who are on the receiving end of that, because I guarantee we're missing a lot more opportunities when we're silent than when we confront that bad behavior. So I'm going to make a note of that, because it came up in the survey and has been mentioned a couple of times about how to manage those interpersonal, and maybe it's not even at a harassment level, but just people are kind of not really getting along or having different ideas, particularly when we bring up really scary words like change, right? That tends to frighten people. And then the last one, I've kind of already hit on this, but maybe the club's not diverse or inclusive. One thing that's interesting to me, I have presented a number of times with past district governor Sigrid Solomon, and she's over 2 hour west. And she and I've done a couple presentations on diversity and inclusion. And you know, I think we tend to think about diversity in race, culture, gender, but then sometimes we're not always looking at age or sexual orientation or gender, or even, you know, accommodating people of all abilities and being accessible to people of all abilities. So even thinking about where your club meets, and if someone who used a wheelchair for mobility, would they be able to easily access your club or participate in service projects, things like that. So particularly for those of you that are membership chairs, trying to really always think through the lens of who are we leaving out? Who's missing from this conversation? You know, what's one more way that we could get one more person who could participate in this project? What am I missing here? Some of you added some things in the chat box, but am I missing some reasons here that a club might lose a member? And feel free to unmute or use the chat.
You know, of course, everybody goes off mute at the same time, right, Jen?
Yeah, go ahead, David.
So the one thing that struck me was the club did not make the member feel welcome, and I fully understand that and fully appreciate that. And I also find it interesting how Rotary clubs look at new members thinking that they have to do 110% of that one-way street welcome, when oftentimes people that are really super interesting members are those that they don't need to meet you halfway, but they're joining because they want to participate and they want to be an active participant usually. And so you can kind of get a good idea of the person when you're reaching out to them to welcome them, but are they reciprocating in any way? Right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point too, of, you know, creating, you know, there've been a lot of clubs that are looking at kind of two-way onboarding that exactly captures what you're saying there, rather than kind of saying, hey, here are the rules for you to become a member, but really creating these kind of two-way partnerships. So that's an excellent point.
Yeah. And Jenny, that was the point. I mean, David, I totally agree with what he said, because it just made me think, I guess whenever we have a new member, maybe what we need is a quote unquote a red badge program for the membership also, to make sure that certain persons do meet this, that not only does this person have to seek out, the new member may have to seek out, but existing members should seek out the new member, not intentionally, not by chance, which is how it's handled in almost every club I know. Other than you may have a mentor, which is great in a mentorship program, but usually that's one person. If you're lucky, it's more than one. But maybe we need to have a much more intentional program within existing members of the club to seek out the new member especially in that first 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. That we had an earlier session on kind of onboarding and welcoming those new members, and some of the most successful, and this is beyond just Rotary. For those of you that know me, my professional job, I work with volunteers for a living. So I, spend a lot of time on how do you get people that you're not paying to do really tough stuff. But when we look at that kind of two-way engagement and two-way mentorship, some of the most effective kind of onboarding or orientation type activities include a mentorship component, because one, you're building a relationship, and it's harder to walk, right? It's really easy to walk away from an institution. It's a little more complicated when you're walking, right? You build those relationships and see that value. But also when you have that two-way orientation or that mentorship component, you're not only engaging that new person, but you're also engaging that existing member in a really substantial way, so that everyone's contributing and growing. And that also tends to make those change conversations come about a little bit easier, because you're infusing all of these new expertise together. So great point.
Jenny,
Oh, go ahead, Wolf.
One of the things our club does is, obviously we have a mentor program, and it's usually a board member or a senior club member who's, paired with the incoming member, and it's their job to seek them out at the beginning of every meeting, introduce them to at least 2 or 3 people, sit at the table with them, invite them to a social event. And it wasn't just one person. There were several people. If you recruited a member, you were also expected to do that, obviously. But it was really effective, I think, when I first joined, even though I knew quite a few people in the club, to have a member I didn't really know engage with me and invite me to the golf outing and actually play, in the outing with me, and invite me to social events, and then get me on a committee, where you really do some things. So I think that was a really valuable experience. And it happened for about a year before I was finally let go and expected to be, a self-serving member.
Great. Yeah, I think, the best of all the worlds of orientation is when you have so someone kind of mentioned that kind of red badge list or that onboarding list, right? I think probably the perfect mix is that mentoring component with those kind of technical, right? Because you need to learn the nuts and bolts of the Rotary Club, but then also creating those relationships. Price has his virtual hand patiently raised.
Jenny, I think a lot of these comments, starting with David, going through Steve and Wolf included, get into this idea of really becoming part of the tribe. We join something because we want to belong to a group. That's when we choose that group, and we stay in the group because that's now our group. And there may be things, once that's part of our group, there may be things about it that we don't think are perfect, but we stay through that. In fact, we're willing maybe to engage in an effort to change the things that we'd like to see done differently. And we're willing to do that because we're part of the group. So the idea of, and Steve Sambo and I have talked about this a lot as well, and it's something our club does, about getting people into real committee work early on, where they are getting to know other people and they're making a difference. And I think that's a big part of feeling like you are part of this group that is really there to do all the things that we say we do as Rotarians, service above self. So I think that's a big component of why people stay
Yeah.
or leave.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Price. I think you're getting some like thumbs up in the chat box.
And just I'll glom on a little bit, Jenny. I'll glom on to a little bit of what Price said, because unfortunately I have to depart at 6. I think Price said something that was subtle, but it's ridiculously impactful, is that the sooner that somebody comes into the club and the sooner they get put on a project or something, and the members that I've seen love being pushed in the pool. They just don't know where the pool is, right? And so the sooner that you get them onto a project, the better. And I think, Jenny, you had mentioned earlier about, you have a lot of members new members come in and they're jacked up about doing this project or that project, or they're into healthcare and they want to do something around that, whatever it is. Our club is like, that's a great idea. So guess who's going to anchor it? Right. And they jam on it. They just love doing that stuff. And we said, we're all your heavy lifters and whatever you need, but welcome to the party. And that's how we engage people right away.
Yeah, no, I love it 100%. I think that's a great practice, because again, there's some magic that happens, right? When people join and kind of say, hey, you're one of us now. And, that it kind of creates really organic clubs that, that change a little bit every time someone new joins. And that's really the point. Steve, I see your virtual hand as well. Steve Sando, sorry.
No, great.
Steve's here.
I figured I'd raise my hand. Now I got to remember how to take it down. But anyway, great topic. And Jenny, I'll go back to how you opened this up. Unfortunately, that exit survey that we tend to glean is the real reason why people leave Rotary. And is this being recorded?
Yes.
Okay, well, just don't share it with anybody. But it is about as relevant as we all know where that goes. Because if you really look at it, it's to make us feel good and kind of come up. I mean, the only two real questions on there that are honest are, hey, if you died, you died. Okay. And if you move to another state, you move to another state. The other ones are just kind of what we think or what they tell us, because they don't want to hurt our feelings. But can you imagine if we put the questions on there? Club failed to engage member in fellowship. Club failed to engage member in service. Club did not provide the value proposition to meet the members the real reasons out there, so that we can do change. And I would be curious what this group thought. I mean, we've talked about finances, we've talked about things, and I realize it's a very broad question. But if somebody is really engaged in Rotary, a lot of those things that we talk about become very small, and they figure out, how to work through them. But what do you think are the top 2 reasons that people truly leave a club? And then what do you think that percentage is? I mean, and I'm kind of curious what everybody's thoughts are in terms of what are the top 2. And I mean, are we talking that 70%, 60% of the reason people really leave? But I'm just kind of curious to get that. Didn't mean to sidetrack you, Jenny, but I'm trying to figure things out myself every day. So.
No, that's actually a good question. So we could kind of do an immersion poll. So either you can unmute or just drop them in the chat box, and we'll do some grassroots data collection for Steve. And some of you kind of got at this in the beginning when I said why, you were all very kind of brutally honest. And when I said, why do people leave your club? You all were kind of honest in that and shared some good insights there. So does anyone have a thought on Steve's question of those top 1 or top 2 reasons people leave? So Wolf says, not getting engaged, not feeling like part of the group. Someone shared 3 and 4. So I think that's club did not meet expectations, and the service opportunities didn't align with that member's expectations. Yeah, and one thing too, the kind of, I reframed those retention, or those termination reasons is to kind of put the onus on the club a little bit, but it doesn't mean that clubs that have lost members because of these things are doing something horribly wrong, right? It's just an opportunity for us to listen and adjust. Yep, so someone shared people getting upset with another member. The member was just kind of ignored. Someone I think said that earlier, like, nobody will notice if I don't come anymore type thing. Never become engaged or join for the wrong reasons. Price, your hand's up.
Yep, thank you. As I'm thinking about this, Jenny, I think there are 2 categories here that we really need to think about. One category is what I'll call club culture. And those are things that maybe we really should be thinking about our ability to change. That is, are we a welcoming club? Are we getting people involved early on in their Rotary experience? Are we working toward diversity and inclusion in how we approach everything that we do? Those are like club cultural issues. Mm-hmm. And those are if you're not achieving well in those categories, you're going to lose people. The other category, it seems to me, is in the category of that particular club situation, like meeting time, location, cost, a little bit, are things that are unique to that club, and there's not a lot that you can do about that. If you're going to continue to be a lunch club, you're going to have certain number of meetings that fall during the lunchtime. And I think the conversation ought to move to acknowledging that that's not always going to work for people to join a lunch club. And so what are we doing to help expose those members to other opportunities with other clubs? I think, and maybe that's because I'm now kind of at this district, focus, but it seems like clubs could be more open to trying to really make sure that the fit is right. And that if someone is having trouble meeting a lunch meeting club, that they're aware of other opportunities through either traditional club experiences or all of the innovative club types that we're working on as options that might work for them better.
Yeah. I think, I think that's a good point of putting those things into the buckets there somewhat, because that way we can build action around them. And Price, you and I must have similar brains, which is either brilliant or very scary. So I shared a document in the chat that is kind of my curated list of my favorite resources, tools, guides, helpful learning tools from both our district, from Rotary International. So it's my favorite ones. I think I settled on like 21 of them, but I kind of listed them into kind of those buckets of, things that are more of logistically that we could do differently, and then those more kind of cultural changes that we could make. And so we'll reference that a couple more times, but it's everything on it as a live link. So I put that in the chat if anyone is interested, and bonus points for anybody who sees my special surprise at the end of that document. Also in the chat, we see here, Sheila's interested in how hybrid meetings will affect retention, giving people kind of a less expensive way to be able to join a meeting. And I'm really hopeful that clubs will continue to embrace at least some element of a virtual component, because of, it just opens up an opportunity for people to be able to participate. clubs, oh, pausing meetings. Okay, so fear that people have kind of found other ways to occupy their time. That's a good point. I'll share a resource, David, here in a second that will kind of address where we'll tackle that a little bit. Okay.
I think one of the things that I'd like to add here, Jenny, is I understand you're trying to be adapting to as many members as you can. However, it's impossible, I believe, to adapt to everyone. Not all members are going to want to do all of the things that you have to do or that you want to do as a club. And finding a single thing to focus on, if everybody wants to participate, is wonderful, but it likely isn't going to be possible. Do I make sense?
You make a lot of sense. And I think, and that's hard, especially depending on the size of your club, right? How many different options can a single club, depending on their size, really sustain? And I think that that's another really excellent reason for, kind of circling back to Price's point about just logistically, sometimes clubs don't work for people. So kind of, helping to create those other opportunities for them, either by introducing them to a club that maybe aligns a little bit better with their expectations. I also think that's the great time that I get excited talking about possible new clubs starting that might not threaten that existing club, but just kind of expand that opportunity in another way. So I think you make a really excellent point. And I think, when I talk to like club presidents, especially, and I know Chuck, you and I have talked about this before, that it's hard to be what everyone needs, right? It's hard to kind of constantly be trying to make sure you're adapting to that. So I definitely recognize the struggle, and that's a good point to add to this conversation. So let's dream a little bit. You have just been given Rotary's magic wand. I heard there really is one. They're probably going to announce it soon. So if you could do anything, like, all of those yes, but conversations, right? When you think, oh, we could try this, but, oh, we could try this, but no buts in this conversation. So you've been given a magic wand. What is one thing, you're only going to do one. What is the one thing that you would do first to solve the biggest retention challenge in your club? You could do anything. There's nothing off the table. There's no issue. There's no barrier to it. What's the one thing that you would do?
Jenny, it's Joe Sexton.
Hi, Joe.
I feel strongly that we can get people engaged, we can talk to them and everything, but unless we build a connection and a relationship with each person, unless we get to know them and not just say, hey, we want you to do this and get involved in this, we need to build relationships with each other. We need to ask each other questions when we get new members. Where are you from? How long have you lived here? What are your interests? And I don't think we're doing enough of that, really getting to know the member and build a connection and a good relationship.
Great.
And that would be the one thing I would suggest for anybody, that's the first thing we all ought to be doing with each other.
Cool. Yeah, I actually, I'm glad that you mentioned that. I have a cool idea that it started in my club, but it was a member named Molly in our club. She was our club membership chair a couple of years ago, and she came up with this idea because we were growing really fast. We had all these new people coming in, and we weren't sure. It's hard to keep track of everybody. And to Chuck's point, kind of, hard to figure out what everybody needed or wanted or was hoping out of their membership. And so Molly came up with this great idea that she called the Rotarizer. And she would randomly, people could, opt into it each quarter, and she would randomly match up two Rotarians. And they were challenged over the course of the next quarter to get to know each other kind of off the resume a little bit, right? Kind of beyond the where do you work, that, kind of the chit chat that you do before the meeting starts. But they were, go have lunch together, people got kind of a little wild, like people were going zip lining together and doing all kinds of wild experiences. But just getting to know each other a little bit more in a more substantial way, to your point. So that's an idea that I think anyone could possibly steal or adapt to kind of meet your own club's needs.
Yeah.
All right.
Jenny, I'll bring one up. I kind of worry if our biggest retention problem isn't ahead of us. You know, as we go back to in-person meetings, you know, some people have gotten quite used to the Zoom meetings. And if you don't have a hybrid type of meeting where they can be engaged in Zoom and in person, you know, I think you're going to lose another batch of people. I think we lost some, you know, when we went to online meetings, you know, some people missed the in-person contact and stopped showing up for the Zoom. But when we go back, I think we're going to lose another batch, maybe that have gotten comfortable with the Zoom. And I don't know if a satellite club or a hybrid meeting is the solution, but, you know, something we need to think about.
No, that's a great point. I know my club meets at 7 o'clock in the morning. So there are definitely some times that I'm like, man, if this were an in-person meeting, I wouldn't have made it today. It's kind of nice to be able to just roll over onto the Zoom call and, you know, kind of show up in my pajamas. Joe, you put something in the chat and I was wondering if you wouldn't mind sharing that a little bit more.
Which is that? I've been running the mouth.
Oh, you said something about satellite clubs. So I wanted to, when we were talking about magic wands, so I wanted to make sure I understood what your, what the one thing was that you do.
Well, no, this is not something we've done, but the opportunity to create satellite clubs, recognizing the criticisms that some members have, is that perhaps some of those could be accommodated through satellite, such as meeting at an alternative time or creating a cause-based satellite, or just interpersonal things, you know, where people could get together in a satellite over in a social setting. Okay,
cool. Then we had another one in here about, again, more interaction with new members is what you do with your magic wands. That seems to be a pretty common one. And one, you don't need I don't think any of us need a magic wand for that, right? It's just kind of coming up with a plan for it. So let's hear one more. Price, what are you doing with your magic wands? First, use your magic wand to unmute yourself.
My magic wand to unmute, thank you. So I've got a different magic wand, and it's sort of giving clubs permission to continue to be all the good things that they are from a cultural standpoint, and to continue to improve that, and also to if they want to continue to be a lunch club that meets in a particular location and it does all these great things in the community, and to be willing to say that that's not going to work for everyone, and then to be really aggressive if someone is moving toward leaving or is leaving, that they're really thinking about how can we help that person stay in Rotary, rather than saying it's our club, and if they don't fit in our club, they don't fit in Rotary. We all of us here on this Zoom know that that's not true. But you know, you referenced early in this discussion the exit surveys that we are working on sending out to people who have left clubs in our district, to really kind of get at what's in their head about that experience, and is there something that they would like to remain in Rotary, but just in a different experience. That's what I would do with my magic wand, is to say to clubs, it's okay to be who you are, but help people find the experience that works for them too.
Great. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And I think, you know, I was being silly about this saying a magic wand, because it's really easy for us to focus on the barriers to big ideas that we have. But no one has said an unattainable idea, right? When I said, if you had a magic wand, what's the one thing you would do, or what's the first thing you would do? All of those things are very possible. So, you know, you absolutely could have kind of a mechanism or a plan for really engaging and connecting with new members. You really could have a plan to have Steve and Matt both shared some really specific ideas for kind of membership committees or subcommittees to really look at those types of things. So all of these are actionable, you know, a satellite club that just kind of recognizing and honoring, hey, we want to keep doing what we're doing because what we're doing is working for a lot of people, but here's this other opportunity, right? I think that's kind of what Joe was saying of, you know, that's maybe an opportunity for that satellite club, or as Steve Heiser calls them, kind of those extension type clubs and opportunities. So none of these things were too wild. None of you said you wanted to start bringing unicorns to your meetings or anything like that. They were all pretty attainable. So I think that's good. All right, so I am gonna, can you all still see the slides?
Yep.
Okay, cool. My screen kind of flashed. I thought maybe I turned them off. So this last few minutes, I want to give some time just for, you know, a couple open questions if we didn't cover something someone was hoping to. I'm going to switch my share here for a second. So I put this doc in the chat box, and I can add it there again if you didn't see it. But I'm going to share one more time and just go through a couple of the resources that I mentioned. So these are just some of my favorites to promote retention. And I tried to break them down so that you could really look, you know, kind of go to exactly what you're looking for. So we didn't talk about alternative membership types of, you know, looking at corporate memberships. I've also heard a lot of creativity around kind of family memberships. And the cool thing is that if a club can dream it, Rotary seems pretty keen to support it and help develop the infrastructure, develop the support for it. So just because it's an idea that you can't find on Rotary.org or you can't find on our district website, doesn't mean that you can't brainstorm that and be the first to try it out. So don't let any of these things be a limitation to your creativity. There's also some information on here about meeting formats. So some of you have brought up ideas about hybrid meetings or even maybe relaxing expectations. So there's even some sample bylaws if you need to get real heavy into it, or just ideas for shaking up meetings a little bit. So if you click on that engaging through meetings, there are 4 very easy to implement ideas to shake up virtual meetings. If your virtual Zoom meetings are feeling a little stale, there's one that I've done a couple of times, helped some clubs in our district set up, and that's doing a co-meeting with another club that happens to meet at the same time as yours. So there's a guide for it. So say you find another club in another time zone, but you just happen to be meeting at that same time, you could have a co-meeting together, which is kind of cool. There's also ways to just add value, right? To give people a little bit more out of their experience. So I know in our district, the district training team with the ever fabulous Dana Vogelmeyer is working on that Rotarians on the Rise professional development program. Rotary also has the Leadership in Action professional development program that you as a club could develop and offer to your community. If you're stuck on service came up a couple times. There are, I think, 6 or 7 ready to go service projects on engaging through service, where they're really easy to adapt to a local community. They can be easily modified to be socially distanced and kind of COVID friendly. So tons of ideas in there. There's 2 that I want to highlight and point out more specifically. So this has come up a little bit. I might have to share my screen again to make sure you all can see it. And this is kind of a tool that's really looking at that. It was developed early, kind of in the pandemic, as people were kind of fading away when we made this shift to virtual. But you can kind of walk through. So if you have an idea, if a member, you haven't seen them in a little while and you kind of have a gut feeling of what's really going on, check your gut kind of, and then there's some steps and some ideas on how you could reach out to that person and kindly and gently talk to them about what's going on, get some feedback from them about their situation. And so this is obviously very COVID specific, but kind of walks through is the issue technology. They're really uncomfortable with the technology and accessing these kind of virtual things. Is it a financial issue? Kind of how can you troubleshoot that? How, what are some ideas that you could implement to remove that as a barrier, even temporarily, for that person? And then someone mentioned in the chat, I can't remember exactly who, but Rotary's kind of taken a back seat either to their own kind of personal obligations, professional obligations, or when maybe Rotary's been a little bit quieter in their life, their attention is kind of focused elsewhere. And how do you navigate? So there's some other, if some of these have clickable links, and it'll expand and give you even more talking points there as well. So that's a tool that is available to you as well, and that I hope you'll check out. And then finally, I've circled back to just one more. There are some other troubleshooting guides in there on kind of welcoming. Someone mentioned it's hard to connect with people when it's all virtual right now. There's some helpful tips in there on how to welcome people that you haven't met in person. I know there are some new members in my Rotary Club that I have never met them in person. I've only ever seen them virtually. And then if you're just more interested in practicing kind of that club flexibility or exploring that a little bit, or just getting some ideas, I've linked all of that information in there, as well as some of those tools Price was kind of alluding to. There's a great assessment through Rotary that helps identify opportunities to be more inclusive and to promote diversity within your club. There's also the club health check, which I highly recommend. And my favorite new tool, which I brag about during every single one of these meetings, which is the club planning assistant. And that's an interactive survey you can take that, based on your responses, recommends Rotary tools or Rotary templates, or even learning courses based on your responses. And finally, at the end, there's
Jenny, can I ask you something real quick?
Yes, please go ahead.
On that, should we have a training of, PEs or PNs or presidents on the club planning assistant? I don't know that, as it's this great tool, but really not that many people know how to use it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, once you find it, it's pretty easy it's pretty easy to use. I do know, because I've been really geeking out over it, and I do know that there are some plans from Rotary to announce that tool more formally to clubs at some point in the coming months. So, I know I kind of just stumbled across it and didn't realize that it had existed. And when I mentioned that, I think specifically to Harris, he had communicated that there was going to be more coming out directly to clubs about that club planning assistant as it was getting rolled out. So, I think certainly encouraging and kind of helping to get club leaders to use it. But you don't have to be a club president to use that tool. And it really just connects you to resources based on what you're hoping for.
And I think you have to be a little careful that you are already throwing a lot at these potential presidents, the president-elect, and adding, it's nice to have the pile of resources in the background, but at the same time, trying to train them at the annual conference might be overkill.
Yeah, good point. So we have about 5 minutes left. So if anyone had an idea or a question that we didn't get to, also, I'm just, kind of subtly leaving this cute picture of the goat up for you all to enjoy as we finish up this conversation.
Was the goat traveling on your back when you took the picture?
No. That's just an internet goat. I just found it. It's not my goat. Would be cool if it was, though. All right. So any other questions, thoughts, ideas, something you hope that we touch on tonight that we haven't?
How do we get people to implement? I think this has been a great session. how do we move to implementate, how do we get clubs to implement? I mean, we got PEs, we got presidents, we got all, how do we make sure that all of us carry this information, these ideas to our clubs? If you're AGs to your multiple clubs, in order to make something happen and not leave all this great information, on the recording, and if you've taken notes, on your notes.
Well, let's think, I think that's a
That's
good,
always the issue in Rotary.
yeah, let's put this to
Yep.
action. So
Exactly.
if we have 3 minutes left, so that's enough time for you each to spend 1 minute or less adding into the chat box, what's one thing that you plan to do or try or talk to someone about? And it doesn't have to be an idea that I shared. It could be an idea you heard from someone else on this call, or just something you thought of during this call. So what's something that you think you could do or that you're interested in doing? Or if you had that magic wand idea, how could you start on that? What's the first step to, promoting that new member engagement, or kind of promoting that, kind of more deeper connection? So Matt shared a membership focus month. And Matt's been doing some cool stuff in his club, and both attracting new members and engaging current members in that process. But then also spotlighting some of the clubs. What do you call that? What do you call the thing you're doing with senior members, the series?
Yeah, our president designate, Jamie Culver, came up with this idea of doing the senior member spotlight. And it's a videotaped interview with an older member, in particular, one that hasn't been showing up to meetings. And but it turns out it's just, maybe it's an age thing, I don't know. But these folks were grade A interviewees with all kinds of history about the club, like what it was like pre-integration of women. I mean, all kinds of great stuff. And so turns out they were awesome. But it was also a way to get them back involved. And it turns out that the ones that we've done that with are now attending meetings online after their interview showed or aired or whatever. So,
Nice.
yeah, thanks.
Yeah, that's been a cool thing to, check out Lancaster. They've been doing some cool stuff. All right, so we have a membership focus month, talking to a club about a participation and retention committee. Steve suggested, kind of sharing these membership sessions with more people. Anyone else? We've got 1 minute left.
So you're gonna turn it off at 6:30, Jenny? I mean, we can't talk anymore.
I mean, I guess you could, but I try to be really conscientious of everyone's time. I appreciate that you all invested this hour with us.
Right.
I'm faster at talking than I am typing, and I would just say I think it's great that every one of you is on this session today because you wanted to figure out how to help tackle these issues, either with your club or with respect to the clubs that you work as assistant governor, etc. So just do one thing. Pick one thing from this program that you'd like to try at your club, or if you're an assistant governor, talk to your presidents each about this program. I'm mindful of what Chuck said about being overwhelmed by all these things that Rotary is trying to tell our club presidents to do. So just pick one thing and try it. Be willing to pick something that may fail. That's something that, again, Steve Sambo told me when I was getting ready to take the reins from him as a club president, that being willing to try something that might fail is okay, right? And we have this tendency to only want to do things that are successful. So it's great that you're all here. Just try something new.
And if you have a very diverse club, you're very likely to fail a lot. I mean, it's something that is a part of doing this job. And so you just have to get through it. I mean, you have to kind of do it.
And you're fighting against inertia. Let's
Oh,
recognize
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yep.
I mean, I brought up a topic this morning at our morning meeting, and, somebody helped me figure out who our next speaker is going to be. And I got absolutely crickets. and you just shake your head and say, okay, what's next? Get another list and try a bunch of other people around the community. So it's
Well,
fun.
ask Price. Price will come to your meeting and speak.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
Just let me know when and where I'll be there. Especially if Joe Evans is going to be there with a glass of wine. I always want to
Wine.
see Joe Evans.
Well, thank you all for spending this time and kind of investing this time. If you have ideas or feedback about future topics, I'm super open to that. And good lesson, right? To always kind of be stretching and trying that one new thing. But if you have feedback, ideas, or want to connect, I dropped that document in the chat box. I can also send it via email. And again, to eliminate people being overwhelmed by how much is out there, I tried to just pick kind of my favorite tools. So use them, share them, and certainly circle back to me if you have feedback or ideas for a future session. But thank you all and have a very happy Tuesday.
Great. Thank you, Jenny.
you,
This
Jenny.
was great.
Bye.
Okay.